I think I'm right.
Hello, ARC family. Welcome to the ARC journey. We are continuing on in our CGGC history. And last week was part one. This is part two of the continuing process. Dr. Guy, I would turn it over to you.
Well, it's good to be doing this, and it's good to remember that this is Christ's church, and that from the beginning he has been in the process of um, redeeming, restoring, reclaiming, recreating his people. That's what the church is all about, and we're a part of this amazing process. Um, Last time we looked at the Reformation because it was Reformation Sunday, and we looked at that great legacy stretching back 500 years. That if you go back just 2/5 of that, you find Weinbrenner uh, realizing that he was part of this great legacy and that he was called as a church leader um, to do what the Lord called him to do. And he stood in that long legacy of men and women who were um, simply trying to be obedient to the Lord's calling to to practice what the text taught them to practice, and to keep calling the church, the brothers and sisters around them, to be what Christ was making them to be. Um, I know I, as a historian, I tend to think in terms of um, these old people and in terms of history and these historic milestones. And I know everybody's not wired that way. It's not on everybody's radar. My mom was one that's not interested in history at all until she got old and learned some things. But now she's intrigued by it, but she's still not wired that way. But um, many people, when they think of history, they think of old stuff, they think of the past, they think of dead things. It's gone, it's irrelevant. And I'm getting to the place where I don't like to use the word history anymore, because that is not at all what I mean when I use the word history. I was taught early on that story is the biggest part of the word history. And that's really what I mean. We're part of this long unfolding story, this long unbroken relational chain that goes back beyond our grandparents and great grandparents and pastors and teachers, but it goes directly from one person to the next in this, maybe covenant chain would be a good picture for those of us that are Christians. We all learn, we've all heard the faith, we've all grown in the faith because of the people that the Lord has put around us, because of what we've watched in their lives, because of what they've said and done. And
Mm.
um, when I think of history and legacy and heritage, these things that matter to me in this covenant chain that goes back, I think not in terms of what is past, but I think of our rootedness. And it's a living thing, not a dead thing. And the fact of the matter is, we never, ever grow out of our rootedness. I think sometimes when we hear the word rootedness, we also think of, that's what anchors the tree where it is. And it does serve that function, but it's not just an anchor. The roots are what feeds the tree.
Mm.
It gets its life from that rootedness, and um, as long as that tree is alive, its roots are feeding it. And when they are no longer feeding it, it is no longer alive. Jesus used that observation, a very simple metaphor. I learned it at church camp, along with many, many, many other people, because we sing that song, Jesus is the vine and we are the branches. His banner over me is love. It's a covenant picture again, but um, that very meaningful, personal, relational picture that the Lord gave his disciples in the upper room. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And the charge to remain in me. Um, it's interesting to look back over the years and to realize the many people that I've become close to over the years that have encouraged me and inspired me, chastened me. Um, and I can't think about my experience in the Allegheny region without thinking of those people, those personalities, those lives that came earlier in the covenant chain, that quite frankly helped to shape my identity, helped to shape my character, helped to shape my understanding of my calling and my comprehension of the scriptures and what it means to be in ministry. It's easy, I think, for us to think in terms of as because our culture kind of shapes it this way, that we are individuals and that our faith is an individual journey, a personal journey, a private journey. But you're not going to get that from Jesus, and you're not going to get that from the scriptures. Nobody is a Christian by themselves. None of us are the church by ourselves. We've we've been pulled into this through this unfolding relational chain, and it's a relational. Well, faith is a relational thing. The triune God is a relational God, and the church is relationally defined. And because of this rootedness, we are defined. We get our particular traits. We have our own particular experience because of this, well, particularity of the place and the people where the Lord has planted us. And it goes to the question, what does it mean to be the body of Christ? Because we as individuals have been grafted into him, the vine. What does it mean to be a conference, a region, an eldership? Um, Something we don't often think about enough, but we're called to be in this together. The Lord, in his sovereignty and his providence, has brought it about in this way. And there's, well, deprivation that happens when we're not attuned to the way in which we're in this together. Um, I could we'll touch on this quite a bit more in the future, but one of the biggest things that jumps out to me is how Weinbrenner um, poured his life into the young men around him, and he shaped them according to his sense of the gospel, his sense of the mission, his taking seriously the great commandment to love the Lord your God with all that you are and to love your neighbor as yourself. I can't help but think about Thomas and John Hickernell, the first pastors in the Allegheny region and Ohio, and um, how he continued to pour himself into those men, continued to to revel in how their ministries thrived in these frontier regions, how all of these churches came from just those few churches started and nurtured by those two men. And by the end of Weinbrenner's life, I don't know if you know his final words or not, but he basically said, um, preach Christ. It's about the gospel. Preach Christ. But then there's the second part. Tell the brothers to stick together. If there's ever a time in our nation that we need to hear this, well, one time would have been when Weinbrenner said it right before the Civil War. And the time in which we live, when we're more divided than ever, with the exception of that time that Weinbrenner was speaking into. Preach Christ, preach the gospel, preach the risen Christ, present and active in our world. And brothers and sisters, we're in this together. We need to stick together.
Powerful, powerful. So rootedness, we have a rootedness in his story. Our story is really his story, which is history, his story, which is now the name for this series for me, his story, the CGGC and ARC, and the importance foundationally, Weinbrenner made disciples who made disciples, right? I mean,
We did.
there's no question about it. That's our DNA, and somehow we need to recapture that.
Yep.
Well, it's great talking with you. Thank you so much. I can't wait for the next installment, and praying for you all. Keep shining, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.